Welcome to the 5-Minute History Podcast from 5minutehistory.com, where every week we take a historic look at things in about 5 minutes. Episode 50. The History of the Moon Landings. The history of the moon landings is one of the most remarkable achievements in human exploration and a defining moment in the 20th century. It represents the culmination of decades of scientific progress, technological innovation, and human determination. The moon landings were part of the United States Apollo program, initiated by NASA, which aimed to fulfill President John F. Kennedy's bold goal of sending a man to the moon and returning him safely to Earth by the end of the 1960s. This ambitious goal came at the height of the Cold War, largely driven by the space race between the United States and the Soviet Union. The roots of the moon landing effort lie in the early space exploration efforts of both the US and the Soviet Union. The Soviets were the first to achieve significant milestones in space, launching Sputnik, the world's first artificial satellite, in 1957. They followed this with the successful launch of Yuri Gagarin in 1961, making him the first human to orbit the Earth. These Soviet successes posed a serious challenge to American prestige, and in response, the United States poured resources into catching up and surpassing Soviet achievements in space. In this context, President Kennedy, in a speech to Congress in May 1961, committed the United States to the goal of landing a man on the moon. The Apollo program, which would eventually make the moon landings a reality, was the result of extensive planning, testing, and engineering. NASA faced enormous challenges in achieving Kennedy's vision, particularly in developing the technology necessary for a successful lunar mission. Key to the program's success was the development of the Saturn V rocket, designed by Wernher von Braun and his team. The Saturn V remains one of the most powerful rockets ever built, capable of launching the Apollo spacecraft into orbit and carrying the astronauts on their journey to the moon. Its power has only recently been surpassed by the Space Launch System, SLS, to be used by NASA for its Artemis moon landing program, and SpaceX's Starship Super Heavy booster, which it intends to use for missions to Mars. The Apollo program did not start smoothly. In January 1967, a tragic accident during a routine pre-launch test for Apollo 1 resulted in the deaths of astronauts Gus Grissom, Ed White, and Roger B. Chaffee. A fire broke out in the command module, and the crew could not escape. This disaster was a devastating setback for NASA, but it also led to a significant overhaul of safety protocols and the redesign of several key systems within the spacecraft. The lessons learned from this tragedy were crucial in ensuring the success of later missions. Following a series of uncrewed test flights, NASA launched Apollo 7 in 1968, the first human-crewed mission of the program. This mission successfully demonstrated the capabilities of the Command and Service Module, which would later carry astronauts to the moon. The real breakthrough came with Apollo 8, which launched in December 1968. Apollo 8 was the first mission to leave Earth's orbit and travel to the moon, where it successfully orbited and transmitted back stunning images of the lunar surface and Earth, including the famous Earthrise photograph. While Apollo 8 did not land on the moon, it marked a significant step forward and proved that NASA was on track to meet Kennedy's goal. The historic moon landing itself took place during the Apollo 11 mission, launched on the 16th of July, 1969. The crew consisted of 3 astronauts: Neil Armstrong, the mission commander, Edwin Buzz Aldrin, the lunar module pilot, and Michael Collins, the command module pilot. After a journey of 4 days, the spacecraft entered lunar orbit. On the 20th of July, 1969, the lunar module, known as the Eagle, separated from the command module, leaving Collins in orbit around the moon while Armstrong and Aldrin descended to the surface. Armstrong and Aldrin encountered a problem as the Eagle approached the surface. Their intended landing site was too rocky. Armstrong took manual control of the spacecraft and guided it to a safer spot, landing with only a tiny amount of fuel remaining. At 2017 UTC, Armstrong radioed to Mission Control in Houston. "Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed." These words marked the first time a human-made vehicle had landed on the Moon's surface. Several hours later, Armstrong became the first human to set foot on the lunar surface, saying, "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." Aldrin joined him shortly afterwards, and together, they spent about 2.5 hours outside the lunar module, conducting experiments, collecting samples, and planting the American flag. The astronauts also placed a plaque on the Moon's surface that read, "Here, men from the planet Earth first set foot upon the Moon, July 1969 AD. We came in peace for all mankind." After spending just over 21 hours on the lunar surface, Armstrong and Aldrin returned to the command module, and the crew of Apollo 11 safely returned to Earth, splashing down in the Pacific Ocean on July 24, 1969. The success of Apollo 11 was a triumph not only for NASA and the United States, but also for humanity as a whole. It demonstrated what was possible through science, technology, and human collaboration. Over the next few years, NASA carried out 5 more successful moon landings, with the final one being Apollo 17, which took place in December 1972. Each mission contributed valuable scientific knowledge about the Moon's composition, geology, and history. However, the moon landings were not without controversy. Some critics argued that the enormous costs of the Apollo program, estimated at $25 billion at the time, could have been better spent on domestic issues, particularly in light of the social and political turmoil of the 1960s. Despite this, the Apollo program remains one of the most significant achievements in the history of exploration, leaving a legacy of inspiration that endures to this day. In the years since the last Apollo mission, there have been no further manned moon landings. However, the Moon remains a focus of interest for space exploration. Recent technological advances and renewed interest from governmental and private space agencies suggest that humanity will soon return to the Moon. NASA's Artemis program aims to send astronauts back to the lunar surface before the end of the 2020s, with a target for the first landing on the Moon currently set for September 2026, with plans to establish a sustainable presence and potentially use the Moon as a stepping stone for future missions to Mars. The moon landings remain a powerful symbol of human achievement, representing the ability to overcome seemingly insurmountable challenges and push the boundaries of what is possible. For many, the sight of Neil Armstrong stepping onto the lunar surface is a reminder of the potential for exploration, discovery, and progress that lies within us all. I hope you enjoyed that episode of the 5-Minute History Podcast from 5minutehistory.com. If you get a chance, please leave a review wherever you get your podcasts, as it will help us to grow. Also, why not check out our other 5-minute podcasts? 5-Minute Biographies, 5-Minute Murder, 5-Minute Mysteries, and 5-Minute Warfare. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next week.